Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm excited to introduce to you one of our fellow authors from the Great Pause Project, which is such an amazing collaboration project with 23 other brilliant minds. And we connected because of Elizabeth. So thank you, Elizabeth.
We
And
love you.
yeah, I'm excited to have you here, Brittany. So I know you have a lot of you do a lot of interesting things. Would you like to share like some of the cool things that you're up to, and talk a little bit about your YouTube channel?
Sure. I don't even know where to begin. So I I actually just had a coworker earlier today. She was like, "How many hats do you actually wear?" And I was like, I mean, too many is probably the wrong answer because a Gemini needs a lot of hats in order to stay stimulated. So maybe just enough hats. Um, primarily I'm a clinical therapist and a life coach. Formerly, well, not formerly, but kind of formerly, I was a psychic medium only and did a lot of energy work and healing work. And then over time that kind of transformed into this coaching life and then turned into therapy. Um, and right now I'm sort of juggling this world of doing research and working in a clinic for kids who are at risk for developing psychosis,
Hmm.
and also doing my coaching and spiritual coaching and still doing the psychic medium stuff on the side. So I'm kind of like split between these two worlds of like being super grounded and like super analytical and like also super up in the air and super woo woo. So
Yeah, that's so cool. That's cool that you have both, right? Because I'm sure one complements the other, right?
absolutely. I think it's something for me that it's a passion of mine because growing up, I I really struggled with my own mental health, pretty debilitating anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. And later on in life, hearing voices. Um, I did the whole medication, traditional therapy route, and it was a struggle. Like, I was not functioning. It was like,
Hmm.
literally at one point like locking myself in a basement because I was like terrified of the way that I felt when I went out into the world.
Hmm.
um and then I met this woman. I was working in insurance, uh in the insurance world at the time, and this woman who is still a dear friend of mine kind of uh, took me under her wing and said like, I think there's, some other stuff going on for you. And I'm like, what are you
Hmm.
talking about? And it turns out she's a psychic medium, and she sort of introduced me to the world of energy and healing in non-traditional ways, and really learning how to like tune in to what's going on for me and my thoughts and things that traditional therapy really didn't do for me.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like night and day for me. I was, got off the meds, wasn't having panic attacks every day, wasn't struggling with, wanting to die all the time.
Hmm.
I could actually live, and there was like confidence and empowerment and all these things that came with it. And I was like, dude, how many other people might not be having success doing the traditional route and might need to learn these other things? So it became this like mission of mine. And I joke that like I wanted to infiltrate the world of psychiatry because they needed to learn other ways, not us needing to have them tell us, these are the meds that you need to be on, end of story.
Hmm.
Um, and so I did. So I work in psychiatry now and I work in research, trying to actually make those changes. And I work with these kids who otherwise would be, slapped on meds and
Hmm.
every experience they have being pathologized. Um, when for me, like kind of reframing it in a way that's like, maybe this is something I can work with rather than against, or feel like I have to fix it or stop it, that was life changing. So I like being able to kind of like merge the worlds and change it that way.
That's really beautiful, Brittany. I like how, because I do think in our society we're too quick to label people or things that are just unexplained, right? Like society, I think we're so science-based sometimes that we only sometimes we even lose our own intuition, right? Like a lot of times people are just like, well, just follow the data. Well,
Mm-hmm.
like, data could be manipulated. Data could be used to tell a story, right? I mean, sometimes it's a good story, but it
Mm-hmm.
depends on, even like conducting some trials. Like it's like people are getting paid to, tell a story, right? So sometimes like they want a specific result, right? So it's like
Yeah.
not to say like you can't trust data, but sometimes it's like just trusting your intuition. I think is as well beyond goes beyond like just doing what everyone else is doing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And you know what? Like intuition, in my opinion, is data. Like if you can look back at all the times that you followed your gut on something, or you can even look back and just be like, I freaking knew that that was going to happen. That's data, in my opinion. Like that's the evidence that you're building to say like something in my body is like signaling to me that something's awry or like that I should follow something. And once you can look back and say that, like that to me is pretty solid evidence versus like, oh, this one time I just pulled something out of my, am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you can.
I have a tendency to have like a terrible trucker mouth, so like I'm glad that I asked. But yeah, I'm like, am I pulling something out of my butt? And like there is no evidence here.
Hmm.
And also you're right, like evidence can be like full of crap or not evidence, but data can be full of crap sometimes. Like I have seen data come through and it's like this person was full of crap. Like because clinically I know them, and then I'll look at like the answers that they give and I'm like, this is literally, they're like lying out of their teeth. So like how many other people do that because they don't want I mean, I feel like there's fear there with science because like yeah, some scientists have like done some grimy stuff and like have done people dirty.
Right.
um so I can understand why there's fear there. And I work with enough people who experience paranoia, where it's like, well, what are you doing with this data? So then like they don't want to give you the whole story because what are you going to do with it? How do I know it's not going to come back to bite me in the ass? And like,
Hmm.
so yeah, I don't always trust data either. I trust intuition more than data.
But you bring up a good point, right? Because there's been so many times where like I was like, yep, I probably shouldn't have done, and then like I'm like I make that stupid mistake and I'm like, oh, and usually like my gut is right like 99% of the time.
Mhm.
It's sometimes like I'll question it if I'm like, well, this is what everyone else does, or this is what like by the book is like what you're supposed to do, right? But everyone's different. So just because it works for someone else doesn't mean like it'll necessarily work for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're right, like our gut is right like 99% of the time. I think the thing that really stops us from following our gut is just it's fear. It's the fear that I'm going to be looked at like an idiot, or like what are you doing, or this is totally against what society would have me do, or what we've been taught as kids. Like my family, this is just reminding me, like my dad has always been like this, like get a job where you're working 9 to 5 and you got to work in corporate and climb the ladder and like make sure you have a secure paycheck. And like I did that life and I friggin' hated it. And I'll never forget when I was like, Dad, I'm leaving corporate to open up a psychic shop. And he was like, no, you're not. I was like, yes, I am. This is what I need to do. I'm drawn to do this. This is going to work out. And he was like, this girl is going to fail miserably and she's going to be living on the streets.
Hmm.
And I was terrified because, who the hell like leaves a steady paycheck to open up a psychic shop and just
Yeah.
like, whatever, I have no like nest egg or anything like that. But I was so drawn to do it that I had to. And had I listened to like the fear or what society says you should do or what your dad says you should do,
Yeah.
then I have no idea where I would be right now
That's
at all.
that's beautiful. I think sometimes like dads mean well, right? Like they
Oh
don't,
yeah.
they're just used to like they want stability, right? They want like comfort. Like, most parents, like I remember like when I did the coaching training program with accomplishment coaching with Elizabeth, my grandma, the first thing my grandma said was like, "Do you make money from this? Like, can you make money from this?" Like, yes, grandma, you can. Like, you make a lot of money, and I was like, oh, God. But like she just,
They
like,
mean well.
grew up like that, and like they went through some hard times, obviously, right? Like, so
Totally.
I blame them for their first question being like,
Yeah. Totally know it was coming from a good place. Absolutely. Love my dad. He's always been like, if I didn't have my dad, so it's cool. Like my dad is very grounded. He's like the analytical left brain dude. And my mom is like the woo woo creative one who's always been like, you can do whatever you want with your life. You know what I mean? So having both of them growing up was in a way difficult because like you're torn, right? Like what should I do? What should I do?
mm,
But then at the same time, like now that I've like learned how to be grounded in my intuition,
uh-huh.
it I make better decisions. And like I have, my dad over here is saying like, okay, just make sure this, and I have the intuitive piece. So it's like it brings that balance in a way that was like kind of difficult to work through when I was younger. But now it's like, this is perfect because he helps me be human and my mom helps me be a healer.
That's beautiful. This conversation kind of reminds me of like I think every human being has like a yin and yang, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have like a dark side, and then we all have like a different side, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting like how the human, like, we're all technically made up of like the same DNA, but we're all so vastly different, and I think that's what makes this a beautiful place to live in, just because you can meet like people from all walks of life, and everyone has such a different perspective. Even twins who grow up in the same can have completely different, like, it's fascinating to me.
Twins are fascinating in general. I just want to study twins all the time.
Huh?
But yeah, it's the yin and yang. It's like for me, everything is about balance. Like, how do I bring it back to balance everything, or even like taking it further than balance and like being able to live in a world where I can hold like multiple truths at one time.
Mm,
Because I feel like that helps us to balance, because if we're tipping over like, no, it has to be this thing or it has to be this thing, you lose that stability and that balance. And I think being able to like hold all these different things at one time is like it's a really powerful place to be mentally and energetically, for sure.
that's interesting. Yeah, I like how you're able to be, you can be whatever you want to be, right? Like if you do want to be more of a healer and more of, connected to the spiritual energy, you can. But if you need to like get shit done and, buy a house or plan for your future, you can as well, right? So
Yeah.
it's awesome because you're very like multidimensional, and I'm sure people would like appreciate that, right? You're clearly not a boring person.
I mean, sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm just chilling on the couch, like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that. Thank you. I try to be like when I'm with clients and stuff, I'm like, listen, the spiritual stuff is so real and like energy is so real, but you also have to be realistic. Like you could be, well, it's practical magic, right? Like you could believe in all that stuff and do it in a way that's going to be helpful and not harmful and like leave you in financial disarray, or because I tell people like you can't be spiritual without being human, and being human includes like going about ways a human would. Like you still have to pay bills,
Mm.
unless you're living off the grid, then like tell me how, because I want to do that. But yeah, like you got to kind of do all the things.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I honestly I don't know too many other like mediums. Like, do you think like every year society is becoming a little bit more open to different types of, because I think like, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, maybe there was a very small subset of like community where
Mhm.
that would be like okay. But I think like every year it seems like people are becoming a little bit more open to different perspectives and different opinions and different energies and things like that.
Yeah, I think so. It's I think back to like the age of Aquarius thing. Like it's like this new age, and um I think it is a very real thing because we see that society is getting pushed more and more and more towards this, like, well, right now it's kind of like forced empathy for some for some people, but it's like this like need or um want to open up to something more than what we've been seeing all along. And I think in that goes for mediumship too. Like people are seeking out other things, and you know TV probably helps with that. Like I think like having shows like the Long Island Medium and stuff, like even though it kind of sets like an interesting example as to what a mediumship reading is actually like, I mean it still opens up people to be like, that's kind of weird, like let me kind of explore that a little bit.
Mm.
And um even science is starting to recognize not that mediumship is real, at least not where I work, not that mediumship is real, but there's something to the framework of spirituality that has been very helpful for people. And I think for me, like as somebody who's like talked to dead people a lot in my life and done psychic work, I think I get asked the question a lot, like, does it bother you that people don't believe in it or that they want you to prove that it's real? And honestly, no, I don't give a shit whether or not you believe in it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not my role is not to say, yes, this is real and prove it to you. I think my role is to help show that, like, it doesn't really matter what you believe in as long as it's a helpful thing for you.
Mm.
And that goes for even like the work that I'm doing in research and clinically, which, I work with a lot of kids who they see things, like, oh, I'm seeing a ghost, or, they're hearing voices, and they're feeling things. There's a ghost around, or I'm pretty sure that, this is happening. And I've been there. So I know that what they're going through doesn't have to be something that is labeled or seen as a negative thing, but like, all right, how do we work sort of within that framework, and have it be something that helps you, right? Like, all right, so if you're seeing dead people, like, who cares? What are you going to do about it? You want to talk to them or tell them to go away? Or like, are you hearing them? Whatever. Like, it's no big deal. And I think that we're as a world kind of like moving closer to that, not caring
Mm.
more so than like hope. I mean, it'd be really cool if like the world was like, oh yeah, so like dead people are real. But do I think that that's going to be a mindset that everybody has one day? I don't know. That's hard to say because there's so many different religions and like different like cultural beliefs that might be like no, and like they're really firm in those beliefs. But I think it's going to be something, and it's moving towards being more widely accepted as like whatever. You know what I mean? Rather than you're a nut.
Yeah, I think obviously like I see why people label things, right? Because I guess it makes it easier for humans to process things. Like,
Hmm.
it just makes, I guess, our lives like easier from a fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
So I could see why people do it. But yeah, I don't think it's ever helpful to like generalize or to have like a negative stigma about anything, right? Because every person has their own individual experience. So who am I to say like my experience is better than yours, right? Like that's unfair,
Hmm.
and yeah, like my mom, I think, sees and talks to ghosts, so she's like definitely someone who like talks to me about this stuff. And yeah, I think, American like society, like Western society, like a lot of times it's just like, yeah, like she needs to get on meds, but
Mm,
like in Vietnam, like it's perfectly normal. Like there's so many people that can talk to dead people, and she, I mean, I think like a lot of times, like I see where she's like coming from, like she can feel like different energies, and like even using like the cell phone, she can feel the radiation
mhm.
and like, the radio waves, and like she's just very sensitive. And yeah, it took me a while to be open about these types of things, because I was like pretty scientific at at some point in my life. But then I think the older I get, the more I realize like I don't know like anything.
Mhm. None of us do.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's what people have a hard time with, they're like, they need to know. And it's like, well, you're probably not gonna till you die. So either like get good with that or struggle. Because like, how are we ever gonna actually have the answers? Like science still only knows like this much about anything. And we really rely on it to like be the end all be all like answer for stuff. And it's like, how are you supposed to measure if a dead person is actually there? You know what I mean? I mean, I know that like in parapsychology, they have like some measures and stuff like that, but like, I don't know how legit that is. I haven't looked into it. Um, like, how are we supposed to actually scientifically know what happens like when you die? Unless we find a way to like bring people back to life after they flatline for like 2 hours. You know what I mean? 2 or 3 hours. Like once you get past what they predict is like where you're like releasing all those chemicals, and that's why you have this like floaty feeling when you're like, because they've like interviewed a lot of people who die and then come back to life, and they're like, it's the most like amazing feeling when you die, and they're like, it's just chemicals being released in your brain. It's like, so then we're gonna have to find a way to like bring someone back to life hours later, so we can't use that as an excuse anymore. And it's like, I don't know how that's gonna happen without like your brain losing oxygen and stuff.
Well, you bring up a good point. I do think like we all like want to know everything, right? I think that's just like natural. And I think sometimes it's good, right? Like our innate curiosity is good, but I
Yeah,
think that's the beauty of the world. Because if we knew everything, then the world wouldn't be as fun and exciting, right? I think
right.
then every time I plunge myself into something brand new, like it's scary, it can be scary, but it's also exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that the unknowns and this, the quote unquote scary things are something that humans want to like either get answers for or outrun. And like we love like the happy stuff, but it's like those scary unknown things are also adventures, like if you can like kind of get into that mindset of like, oh my god, I'm going on this insane adventure and I don't know what's going to happen, it's scaring the shit out of me, but it's also really exciting because I don't know what's going to be on the other side of it. Like that's kind of awesome too. And I think ultimately it all brings just like really kick-ass lessons, which in my opinion is like the whole point of being a human to begin with, is to like learn and grow. And I definitely am like one of those of the mindset that like we are in school right now. Like this is school for your soul. Like that used to be the name of my business, was like school for the soul. Just we're learning, and then we graduate, and then if you failed, you gotta come back. Not failed, but like if there's more lessons that need to be learned, it's like grades in my head is kind of how I like rationalize being human. But
Hmm.
yeah.
I'm curious, like, are you friends with other mediums as well?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Is there like practices? I guess like with anything else, right? The more you practice it, the better you get, right? S-
Yeah.
Is there like a book or a type of like methodologies or trainings that you can go through?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone can be a medium. Anyone at all could be. You're already intuitive, like you're already psychic. It's just a matter of fine tuning it. So like we were talking about gut feelings before. Um, I don't think I've ever met somebody in my life who hasn't had a gut feeling. And I always put it out there whenever I do like podcasts, like if you're someone who's never had a gut feeling, reach out to me because I need to know who this alien is. No offense, totally kidding. Love you, love you. But yeah, your gut feelings, that's just like, that's like stage one. And then it's learning how to really like tune into that. So,
Hmm.
if you've ever been in a room where like it feels awkward, like awkward tension, like that's energy, right? So like you learn how to tune into the shifts around you, the shifts around the environment. And really it starts with mindfulness, just like mindful awareness of how I'm feeling and how that changes when I question something or when I'm connecting to someone. And then talking is key. You just keep talking about everything you're experiencing.
Hmm.
um because then you get into the practice of creating messages out of the things that you're feeling, the things that you're seeing as you're talking, the things that you're hearing. And yeah, so mindfulness is like the biggest first step with that. And meditation, like if you meditate, they have a million meditations out there to like ground out, connect to your guides, connect to spirit, and just practice the art of getting in tune with energy, because that's all it is. Whether you're talking about dead people or whether you're talking about telling the future or like what's going on for somebody right now, it's all just energy. So it's how do I interpret it the same way I would interpret awkward tension and turning it into a message.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I remember like going to this 9/11 memorial, and like I felt something different there, you know? Like I remember like crying and just being very like emotional,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, that's an interesting concept. So because you're right. Like I do think that like when I meditate, sometimes like I just feel so like connected, right, to the
Mm-hmm.
world. But I guess I haven't really thought about it from a practice. Like, oh, okay, like I'm being more in touch with like the energy of like what's the current events and things like that. Like, whatever's going on in the world, you know.
Yeah, that's what it is. Whether you're connecting to yourself, whether you're connecting to the world, or if you want to like set the intention to connect to someone in spirit, it's
Mm.
we just want to remember that like you and I are energy also. The only thing that's stopping us from being a dead person is like this meat sack. Like we're stuck in this little sack of meat, trapped in here, being human, and dead people just don't have that thing like keeping them here. So all we're doing is connecting to something that's the same as us, that's outside of a body.
Huh.
And the only way that they can connect to us is using what we have, which is our meat sack. So they're using our our mind, they're using all of our senses. So the way that we feel, like if you ever feel like someone's watching you, or you get like the chills when something really good happens, like it's all of those different sensory things. It's
Hmm.
emotions that you feel. It's all encompassing, taking over your body of, what am I experiencing in this moment, and then translating it. Because that's what being a medium is.
Mm.
You're basically a translator for energy
Huh.
to someone else.
That's pretty cool. So obviously doing this work, like you really have to manage your own energy, right? Because like if you're always go on the go and you're always, I'm sure it can be draining after a hard day, right? If so, you really have to take the time to like take care of yourself and eat properly and nutrition and all that good stuff, right?
Yes. I used to be really on top of my energy, meditating every day. And once COVID hit, I was so guilty of just kind of like losing myself to the chaos of the world. And I felt a significant difference in my mental health and in my ability to connect to anything.
Hmm.
So, and I started to have like really bad anxiety again, because part of my anxiety, was that I was feeling so much energy.
Hmm.
So working on my energy and learning how to sort of intuit what's going on and connecting to spirits and things like that helped me to align my energy. So I wasn't having anxiety anymore. And I could say like, oh, this overwhelming feeling, oh, that's for you right now, blah, 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 blah. And like can give a quick message, or like, oh, that feeling is my dead grandma coming to talk to me.
Oh.
Um, so I noticed, you know, especially being home now, that I felt so disconnected and felt overwhelming anxiety again. And I'm like, okay, what should I do? And I'm like, duh, the same thing you tell everybody to do. So I started to meditate every day again. And it has once again been like night and day. Like, oh my God, I feel so much better. So meditating, I do yoga as often as possible. I am very conscientious about how I eat. I'm not one of those like everybody needs to be vegan, but like I personally am, just for health reasons.
Mm.
And it just helps me to feel better. But I think the biggest thing is being able to like is meditating, grounding, movement, and being able to purge. So whether that means like you have a coach, that you have a therapist, that you have a journal, that you have a sounding board, like being able to get things out and like work through your thoughts is pretty vital in my opinion to like getting your energy in check. Because I hear from a lot of people like, I just don't get it. Like I'm meditating every day and I ground and I do yoga and like I'm eating well and I'm just a mess. And I'm like, well, what are you doing for the mental part? Because we forget that that's a part too. It's not just the spiritual. It's not just the body. Like you got a mind in there too. And thoughts don't stop processing the way that they're accustomed to processing just because you know how to meditate now. So like that's a big part of it is learning how to use mindfulness to work with your thoughts and keep yourself grounded energetically.
That's really important. I mean, obviously, like, especially right now, right, because of the pandemic, but even after this is done, I think too many of us are afraid to, especially parents, I think they're afraid to put themselves first, right? It's like, oh, it's about my kids, or, oh, but, people forget that, hey, like, if you're not at 100%, then, like, your kids can feed off of that and, know that you're stressed out. And then that can translate to them and they feel some of that as well, right? So always put yourself first, and typically things like always work themselves out.
I agree. I think when people hear, put yourself first, that it's like has such a shock value because that's what we've been taught, right? Like we've talked so much about like the things that society teaches us.
Yeah.
And I think that right now that gets misconstrued for being selfish. Like by putting yourself first, that doesn't mean you're saying, F off kid, like, never going to care about you again, or like deal with you way later. It's not saying you're not feeding your kids. It's not saying that you're not worrying about their well-being. If your kid comes up to you and their finger's severed off, obviously if you're meditating, you're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
But what it's saying is like, how can you make space for you also? Like, I hate the ranks, like first, second, third, like, why can't it be also, just how do you make space throughout your day for 5 minutes? Like rope your kid in, like, let's learn to breathe, kid. Cause that kid's going to need to learn how to breathe too. You know what I mean? And like, it's just about reconstructing our life in a way that's comes from like an also, rather than like an either or.
Mm. And you bring up a good point. I feel like every human being, especially kids, like should learn how to meditate, right? Like that would be such a valuable skill. Like if I learned that as a kid, like, oh my God, I'm sure my life would be so different right now.
Oh my God. I wish that I had like me as a guide then, because holy shit. Like I was such a mess with anxiety. Even when I was like 3, we have videotapes of me just like bugging out over everything. And
Huh.
oh my God, if I had known that was something that was possible, then my whole life would have been different. And I probably wouldn't have like crazy memory issues from being on meds for so long.
I guess I could see that's probably why you're doing things like the like your YouTube channel and stuff like that, because you want to give back and you want to help out others who didn't have those when you were little, you didn't have those resources, right? That's probably why you're so passionate about being a teacher and sharing the wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. And oh my God, am I not the worst marketer ever of my own stuff? Like, I totally haven't talked about this freaking YouTube show.
Oh yeah, yeah. I yeah, talk. I would love to.
um, yeah, you're right though. Like, that's exactly why I do it. Because part of me, so my coaching work is like, that's my baby. Like, I love it so much. And doing like full-time research and clinical work took away from that. And it made me sad, but I also knew that, like, I know that I'm in the right place, but I was like, all right, I got to find a way to get to as many people as possible. Like, I still have my coaching clients, but I just can't stretch myself so thin that then I'm like of no use to people. Like, hello, putting yourself first a little bit, but more so like creating space for me and everybody else. Um, so putting stuff on YouTube was something I wanted to do for a long time. And, you know, like, thanks COVID, because I have time to film stuff now. Um, but yeah, I like being able, and I get to connect to people that I wouldn't have, but I like to put the tools out there like for free. Like, here's something someone struggles with. Okay, how do we work through that? Here's some tools and techniques. And I'm still like very accessible if someone's struggling or if someone still wants sessions. But for me, it was, yeah, is a way to connect people and have that resource out there. So you also know you're not alone. And I think people who especially struggle with, you know, boundaries, empowerment issues, anxiety, depression, like, they need to know that you can get out of that, because I've been trapped in that like perception of a box, like I'm just so effed right now and can't get out of it. um and I like need people to know that they can overcome it. It's like such a passion of mine. So
Well, that's beautiful because I think a lot of us think that we're alone. Like they're like I'm sure you know, like you said, like when you're younger, you're probably like I'm the only person that thinks this way or has all these different like thoughts, and you know, you're probably like, man, like I feel so different than everyone, right? But then when you go on things like YouTube and you see others that have experienced like exactly the same thing, you're like, whoa, like this is amazing. And I think that's cool that you're doing that because not everyone is bold enough to put themselves out there like that. Because like sometimes there would be people that write like mean comments, right?
mhm,
You
mhm.
know, but it sounds like you're in a good place now that even when you do receive these mean comments, like, you know, like, hey, at the core, like, I'm helping a lot of people. And of course, there's going to be some like annoying people along the way, but that's just how it is. You know, that's just life.
Yep. I had a YouTube show years ago, with another one of, um, with another medium, and I remember we had posted this video and some guy wrote on there like, this is called schizophrenia, you need help. And I laughed so hard because now it's like, well, I work with people with schizophrenia. It's definitely not, buddy. But yeah, I mean, I'm an open book. I have like no shame at this point. Like, ask me whatever. Here's my story. Because yeah, you're gonna get haters. You're gonna get mean comments. Someone's always got something to say. But when you know where that's coming from, which is their own shit,
Yeah.
it's like whatever. Stay in your stuff.
That's like, I would say out of like the hundreds and hundreds of hours of like doing all this self development work, that's like, if I could summarize it into like one takeaway, it's like you are like what you put out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm looking for like flaws in people, if I'm looking for like people who are judgmental, it's like, well, I'm being judgmental about that, right? But if I'm
Mm-hmm.
like complimenting people all the time and I see the greatness in everyone and like their light and like their radiance or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
then it for me, like I see that I'm also like that too, you know? So I would say like to summarize like all of the probably by now 1,000 hours of self development, like that's probably the biggest takeaway for me.
Absolutely. I think that was a huge wake up call for any empowerment development and confidence, because it's like, wow, I have been so worried about these people who are judging me, but let's actually think about like where that comes from. And when you know that it comes from judgment of themselves, then it's like, oh man, all right, I see you. I've been insecure too. Boom, here's some light. Like, here's some healing. So you can get one day
Yeah.
to where we develop to, which is like, what are you gonna do if somebody talks shit? You know, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome. I love like you have fun in life too, right? Because I do think like sometimes like the older we get, like the less fun we have sometimes, because we're too busy like, oh, I gotta buy a house, or oh, I gotta like do the. So that's cool. Like I really appreciate that you're still able to have fun despite like obviously having dreams and goals and all these ambitions and cool projects that you're working on.
I really try. Actually, just before this call, I was having a dance party in the living room.
That's awesome. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That's why you're like so happy.
I had to. I had so much energy because I got some like really awesome news that made me cry, and I can't share it yet, but I can't wait till I can share it. And I was just like bursting at the seams. So like my boyfriend just started blasting some music, and I was
Oh,
just like dancing around the living room trying to like get my juju out, and it was great.
that's awesome. This okay, I'm looking forward to it. Does it rhyme with uh I can't even what rhymes with home? I don't know any words that rhyme with home.
Foam, foam. No, actually, this is even more exciting than that, which it was funny because I was like, as we were dancing, and I was just like, I don't even think I'm going to be this excited like when we have a baby. Like, um, but that could just be me in the moment. But yeah, I'll totally announce it because it's going to be a YouTube announcement because it has a lot to do with manifesting, um, and just like crazy shit. So I'm just like so pumped.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Excited for you.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, this has been a pretty interesting conversation. I really appreciate what advice would you give for people who are like they've always wanted to put themselves out there and do a YouTube channel, but they're afraid of like, oh, like is my hair gonna look good, or oh, is my house dirty? Like, what advice would you give people to just take the plunge?
Who fucking cares? No, I'm just kidding.
That's good advice.
I mean, it's like we said, they're going to judge you anyway.
Mm,
So, I mean, it doesn't matter who you present yourself as, whether you present yourself as like this very put together, like Insta famous, like whatever they're called, influencer, or you come in there looking disheveled like I do half the time. Like, you're going to get judged either way. So
yeah,
you can either get judged for being yourself and so you don't have to work too hard, or you can get judged for being someone else, but you're putting 10 times more energy into being this other person. So it's really up to you. And if you feel like you have a message to convey, someone out there needs to hear it,
mm,
so do it.
that's a good point. I do. It's interesting because I do think people can sense the authenticity, right? So if you are out of alignment and you do try to be something else, like I think most people can see it and they're like, oh, like yeah, they're trying too hard, or they're trying to be something that they're not, right? So I do think humans are like can read that, right? We can tell like, okay, like this person's full of shit, or like
Mm-hmm.
fascinating story, like thanks for sharing.
Right. Yeah. Authenticity, I mean, it's pretty key in my opinion, but I know it's hard to put yourself out there. Um, but there's a reason that you want to. So, I mean, as long as things are done with the right intentions, like, are you putting yourself out there because you want to be Insta famous, or do you want to put yourself out there because you want to help, or, you know, you're hilarious and you want to help through comedy, or, you know, your art and through joy, like whatever, fuck it.
No, that's beautiful. I like to your point. I think we all have like a creative expression that we want to express,
Mhm.
but I think sometimes like you get jaded, right? Because like maybe that one time you did the talent show, or maybe you had that one teacher that was like, yeah, you probably should quit your, don't quit
Mhm.
your day job, right? And then that one moment wrecks you, and you're like, oh no. Like I remember I used to be like a huge, like I used to love playing video games, and
Mhm.
had a buddy of mine that was like, dude, like you got to grow up, like you're like an adult now. And I was just like, oh, I guess I'm never playing video games anymore. And like, from that day on, like I stopped having fun, and it's crazy. I'm like, damn, like I didn't realize how one person impacted me for like 10 years.
Are you playing video games now?
I do play more like a lot more video games, yeah.
Homework assignment, do some video games.
I mean, after this conversation, I feel like I just need to have like just spontaneous dance parties all the time.
I hope you do.
That's awesome. No, because I feel like I used to be like that, where like I used to just be super silly and like goofy, but then like so many people were like, "What are you doing?" And then after a while, I'm like, "Oh, am I like being weird?" So then like slowly every year, I got like more and more serious, and then now sometimes I was like, dude, like I used to go clubbing every week. Like, what's going on with like I'm so different now.
I know. I part of it's like adulting, but the other part of it's like I would much rather grow down than grow up, because like old people who are boring. Like I want to be like a kid, you know, like see the magic in things, have fun with little things. Like why not? Like the only people stopping you is yourself, and like these fake rules that we have. Like what a fake story to kind of like keep us boxed in. Like if you want to be boring or not have fun, like that's you. But I'm gonna be over here, my purple hair, spinning around my living room, living my best life.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Brittany. I learned a lot about like joy and curiosity and wonder, and just being more in tune with like not only ourselves but with the energy of like everything, right? Like with the world, the people around you, and yeah, this has been a really cool conversation. Thanks for being like so authentically you, for sharing your wisdom with the world, bringing light and joy and fun in a much needed time. And yeah, for just being like a shining, bright, radiant ball of energy all the time. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for doing awesome things like this and connecting people and like having these authentic convos. This is good stuff, man. And you better play video games.
Right? That would be like our check-in. It's like, hey, when was
Yeah.
the last time you played video game?
I'm going to send you an email and I'm going to be like, listen, I need to know how many points you racked up or whatever.
Yeah.
Clearly, I'm not a gamer.
So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You are great.
cheers.